We're just about to go live, Larissa, on the live stream. We're just about to go live, Larissa, on the live stream. So that was a repeat of me back. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Software Design Simplified, the live stream. We're on live stream number 3 now. So yeah, still early days. I've got a little bit of a different setup today with whiteboards and Zoom. So let's see how we get on. We may have a few technical issues, hopefully not. So we are live on YouTube. Please do not swear, as they say, as used to say on Channel 4. So this is what we're going to be talking about today, the 4 rules of simple design. This is an incredibly powerful technique that I've learned over the years. Kent Beck invented it. So the legend himself, who came up with test-driven development and hundreds of other ideas. So we're going to go a bit about, we're going to talk a bit about the definition and purpose for 15 minutes. And then we're going to work through a practical example, because I don't want to stay in theory for too long, because it's boring. And nobody deals in theory, do we? We deal in real software and real messy code bases. So the 4 principles are, it works, it has good names, it has no duplication, and it has no cruft or no unnecessary elements. So I'm going to cover each of these in an example in the time breakdown, as you can see there. So here are the 4 rules. This is kind of the definition. So works means, some people say passes all the tests. Personally, I would say if you have no tests or limited tests, they don't need to be automated tests. They can be manual tests. You might want to run it in the browser, click on a certain sequence 3 times. Of course, it's not that reliable. Better to have automated tests, but better manual tests than none. So it works to your satisfaction. That's the first criteria. So you don't worry about naming, you don't worry about variables, you don't worry about design until you've got a little chunk of the system working. That's step 1. Step 2 is good names. What does a good name mean? A good name is a name that expresses intent. That's just a fancy way of saying it reads like English and you can understand what's going on. And we'll get into some of the characteristics of what a good name is later. Hi, Byron. Welcome. I should say, everybody who's just joined, feel free to communicate in the chat. If you've got any questions, I absolutely love interaction. If you really want, pipe up, but people are a bit shy to do that in general. So use the chat, it's there. I've got it open on a separate monitor here. So if any questions come up, I'll just address them in the live stream. So good names are all about expressing intent. And we'll see some examples of some good names later on and some very bad names later on. The next one is duplication, no duplication. So, I mean, you know, it might be that you want a little bit of duplication. I think strictly no duplication is not a great idea to adhere to it too strictly, because you can lead to very fragile code. But the aim is to reduce duplication of code or ideas. And it's the ideas bit that some people don't really fully get. And finally, no cruft, no dead code, no unnecessary elements. And really the purpose of this is 3 purposes, 3 reasons I use it anyway. 1, the code that comes out of it at the other end is much simpler than it would have otherwise been. Number 2, it's easier to maintain and understand and therefore change. And number 3, this gives you a step-by-step process. I don't know if anybody's ever had this experience. If you look at this 3,000 line method and you just think, where on earth do I even start? Like, this is calling this and that's calling this, and I need to make this change. And that's where everything starts for us, isn't it? Is we want to make a change to the software, and then we have to research the thing for 16 hours to even figure out where to make the change. And then we change this one bit over here and it has all these ripple effects. So the name of the game with good design is easy to maintain and easy to change code. And with that, I'm going to invite Jake to do a bit of pairing with me. And I'm going to introduce this code example. You may have seen it if you've watched previous streams, or you may not. So just bear with me 1 second. So this is it's a Java code base. So apologies for those who aren't familiar with Java. I'm not familiar in Java. I know what I'm doing in Java. So just try and take the principles away and the ideas and leave the syntax behind. So if I click play, we're going to see it's a pretty basic calculator. This is from John Crickett's coding challenges. Thank you very much to John Crickett. He has, I should give him a little plug here. He has a whole set of coding challenges at codingchallenges.substack.com. It's really, really excellent if you're learning programming and you want some nice, tight examples that are also practical to work on. So no kind of artificial leaked code kind of examples here. So this is his calculator example, and we're doing ours using a GUI, and we've already built this thing here. 1 + 1 = 2. Brilliant. I didn't know that. Wonderful. And here is the code. Now, I've taken this code from somebody else online. It's an open source bit of software. And as you can see, it's quite long. There is a lot to it. And so we're just going to focus on this little chunk of code here. And the objective of the game here is we want to add a sign button. So SIN, it's a mathematical function that takes the sign of a number. And we want to add that to the screen. It doesn't even have to work. We just want the button to display. So if I were looking through this and I wanted to add the sign button, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't have a freaking clue where to start. We've got number button 7, panel.add. Now, each of these lines, I should give you a bit of context because I don't want us to be here till Christmas. Each of these lines lays out a separate button on the panel. And what's the panel? It's this thing here, this bit in the middle. And we're going to add to the panel number button 7. And then we're going to add number button 8. Don't know about you, but I don't talk like this at all. And then, so we're going to use the 4 rules of simple design to refactor this. The good news is we've already achieved rule 1 because it works. And every so often, we're going to launch the app just to make sure that it still works. That's important because at every stage of refactoring change, we want to make sure we've not broken anything. So Jake, are you ready?
I am.
Awesome sauce. Let's compress that. And is this size a decent size for you, Jake, on your monitor? Can you see what you're doing? Can everybody see this code here?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Just put a message in the chat if it's too small for you. So we're going to go through and we're going to do the second rule, which is good names. We want good names. We want names that express intent. And when we're thinking about intent, what we want to do is start at the very top. Now, the very top, of course, normally you would start at the very top of the file, but we would just be here for hours and hours and hours. So I've started halfway down the file deliberately. And it's a very simple process. You start at the top of the file and you read the lines, as I just did, out loud. And as you're reading them out loud, notice any words that you're saying where you think, hang on, that doesn't make sense. That's not English. That's not how I describe it. So Jake, panel.add number button 7. What there isn't English? What there doesn't make sense?
Number BTN.
Number BTN. But I would say more than that, panel. What's a panel? Like to me, a panel is, you know, if you're beating a panel to put on a car or something, or a panel is a panel in a room if you're doing paneling, but it's nothing to do with a calculator. A panel is a technical term that, I mean, I'm sure the panel is a Java panel or something, like it's a, yeah, there you go, it's a J panel. So the author has clearly thought, well, it's a J panel, so it's a panel. No, it's not. It's not a panel. I would argue this is a keypad. Like, launch it, you look at it, and again, it clues in how you describe it. You say, I'm going to punch something into the keypad, or maybe I don't know what else. Can you think of an alternative name, Jake? If not, we'll just go for keypad.
I guess keypad's good.
Cool. So we're going to rename panel. So if you press F2 using the magic of a proper IDE, should be able to rename it. Does F2 work for you, Jake?
Do I have to highlight it?
Oh, no, not number 2, F2, function 2. It's okay, I can do it. Sorry, yeah. So if you type in here, keypad, awesome, and click refactor, boom. I love IDEs. So that's the first step done. We're going to add to the keypad number button 7. Now it gets a bit more complicated because number button 7 is an array of J buttons, and it iterates through all the number buttons and does all of this quite complicated stuff. So this is not a number button. This is an array of number buttons, I would say. So we're going to add the 7th item in the number buttons array. So we're going to work on this, but let's just call it number buttons for now. So I'm going to hit F2, and Jake, if you just type in capital N, capital B, number buttons, plural.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Number buttons in full. Number buttons. Plural. Perfect. And then hit refactor. And I don't know about you, but already that's better. Like, we just made 2 names better. And look at the difference, because the names are all through the file. So number buttons 7, there is a better way of describing that, I would say. But let's just leave that to one side for now. What about this name here, function button? Function button 0, this is where it gets really fun, because again, a little bit of context for everybody. Function button 0 is not just a random function button, it's the add button. So why on earth can't we just call it add button? It's not rocket science, is it? So why don't you rename everything in those brackets, Jake, to be number button? Sorry, add button, something like that. Add button, or maybe addition button. That's it. And then you won't be able to hit F2 because it won't be able to, that's not a variable that it can rename. So you'll just have to type add button, capital A, capital B, because that's the that's the terminology in Java. So, and we want to open close brackets because it's going to have to be a function. It's going to have to be a method. Now, we can just say add button, but I think it'd be even better if we could say create add button. Because what we could do is we could assign a variable to be add button from up here. We could do all this silly nonsense, but actually, why don't we just create the button? I'll just type it here, create add button. So we're actually adding it to the keypad and we're creating it almost on the fly. And the reason I'm suggesting that is because we've got these number buttons and we're setting them all up in an array. And we've got these function buttons and we're setting all those up in an array. But that means all of this code is kind of remote from this area. So it sets up all this weird, you have to scroll up, you have to scroll down, you have to scroll up, scroll down. Let's just cut out all of that nonsense and write the code we wish we had. And if you were here a few weeks ago, you'll have seen that we did programming by intent, which is all about writing the code we wish we had and then making it work. So if I read something like keypad.add, create add button, I'm going to be pretty happy. I kind of know what's going on there. So how are we going to make that work? Of course, at the moment, if you hit play, it's not going to like it. So Jake, if you do option return, it should bring up the nice little dialog box. Or you can just click, you can click the little alert on the left if you wish. Probably a better idea, actually. And then there's a handy method for us, create method. We want that. Now it's going to give back a J button. Again, there's no way of knowing this. It's a capital J, capital B. And if you start typing that J, it'll give you an autocomplete. That's it, right at the top there. Okay. So if you hit play again, let's see if it works. There's nothing in that create add button, so it's going to complain. It's going to say, no, you need to give us a return. So what do we put in that create add button? Well, I'll show you, because again, in a real life situation, this takes hours and hours and hours of really getting your head around how all the code works, and we don't have hours. This is essentially the code to change a button, to essentially lay out a button to create one. So if you copy and paste that code into that method, Jake, we're going to get this working. Nice. Oh, no. It's okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll drive and then you can just kind of, I'll give you a few hints and you can tell me what to do. So why do you think this isn't working now, Jake? Why is it giving us red eyes all the way along?
It was in a loop, wasn't it? So,
yeah. So what we need to do is get rid of all of this nonsense here and just say button. And we're going to create a new button at the very beginning of the method because we're creating an add button from scratch. And it's a new J button. And you pass into the button the text that you want the button to have. It's going to be a plus. Now, what do you think we need to do, Jake, to get all of those eyes away?
just replace function btn index I with button.
Exactly. Cool. So do that. Extremely laborious. Where's multi-curse when you need it, eh? I'm sorry, I've not been paying attention to the chat. Let me just do this. Why make them plural? Okay. Why make these numbers plural, these number buttons? Why make them plural? That's a great question, because currently they're an array of number buttons, and this sets it up to be an array. This is the Java syntax for an array of 10 J buttons. So that's why we've renamed them to be buttons, but it's not great. What I'd like to see here is create number button 7. That's kind of where we're going to be going, but I just want to work in small steps. It should be number button. It creates more sense if we're adding a single button. Absolutely, yeah. Maybe I should have gone down the path of renaming that first, but I thought I wanted to kind of show the function button first. So we'll do the function button, then we'll revisit these number buttons ones, because I agree, I'm not really happy with that. So create add button. There's one last thing we need to do, which is return the button. And that's why it's complaining at us. Now it's happy. And press play. Hey, we've got our calculator back. Cool. So now let's do exactly what you're suggesting in the comments and change this to B. So what would you change this to be, Jake? I would kind of go along the lines of create number button, maybe. Something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
And that way, like if we're doing create number 6 button, create number 8 button, create number 9, we're just going to end up with all these silly methods when we could just pass a parameter in for the number. All right, so do your thing, Jake. You can press the little red alert button on the left-hand side and create a new method. Again, it'll return a J button. Okay, now this time it's not quite the same. We had this code to create functions, but if we look back up here, it looks almost the same, but it's not quite the same. And we'll see the difference when we get onto stage 3. But right now, I'm just not going to worry whether it's the same or not, or what the differences are, or how we can refactor it. I'm just going to plonk it in there. I'm going to do exactly what we did last time. So this is going to be a J button. This is going to be a number button, I suppose. And we're going to do exactly what we did. And what I could do, of course, this is the point at which it's extremely easy to get distracted. I see many developers do this, including myself when I started. And you start saying, oh, there's all this duplication here, let's remove the duplication. No, 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 that's stage 2. You go down and you keep disciplined and you keep focused on the step that you're on until you've finished. And what you'll see from that is once you've gone through all the names, that's when you can see patterns emerge and that's when you can see linkages. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So it's black. Black is a good thing because it means the compiler is happy with us. Hey, we've got our calculator. Excellent. So now I'm just going to quickly do this for all the number buttons whilst cursing the fact that I haven't activated any sort of multi-cursor plugin. I guess if I was any sort of a developer, I would use Final Place, wouldn't I? Okay, and then we'll do this. I'm used to using Vim, everybody, so I tend to switch Vim off for these sessions because it freaks people out a little bit in general. But Vim for the win, as it were. All right, we're going to run it again, make sure we haven't broken anything. All looks cushy to me. I always wondered what 1 + 1 was. And now I know. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this function button 1 and 2 and 7 and 4. I mean, how on earth can you possibly change it when it's accessing an index of an array of function buttons, and the array of function buttons is set up here, and then even further up, that's where you get to know which mapping is. So you have to keep scrolling up and down. What's 2 again? Oh, it's multiplication. What's 4 again? Oh, I can't remember where. So it's a nightmare to change this kind of code. And this is what we call kind of spooky action at a distance. You're changing something over here, and something else over here is changing. It's coupling. It's coupling. So you want this thing and this thing to be completely separate, or you want them to be completely together. But you don't want this thing over here changing. Like if I just do that, now I've just broken the calculator. The numbers are the wrong, the buttons are the wrong way around. And now everything else that depends on those indices is now broken. Doesn't understand what the indices are anymore. So we want to take this silly kind of remote action at a distance, and we want to number it. So we want to name it correctly. What is function button 1? It is subtract. So why don't we say, I know it's a bit radical, stay with me, create, subtract. That's it. Whoa, imagine that. We're going to create the method. I'm going to return a J button. I'm just going to copy and paste what we had in create add button. I'm going to change this one line here, which for any of you who are familiar with software development already should be ringing some bells. Duplication. Okay. So now we're going to function number 2 is, despite me having done this exercise about 4 times, I still can't remember which is which. And 7 is dec button. This is hilarious because dec button is not decrement, it's decimal, obviously. Why would it not be? Pretty obvious, isn't it? Now, if I was doing this, I would make a method one at a time, but I'm just doing this for speed because we're rapidly running out of time already. Equal button, I want to get to a stage where you can see it finished and not just watch you doing, have you watch me doing grunt work. Equal, equals button. And then the next one is 3, and that is division button. We're getting there. 8 is open bracket. Open bracket button. And this one is close bracket button. Okay. Obviously, this is going to be really unhappy with us. Loads of red. I'm going to put create multiply button. Now here I'm going to start to, you could say cheat, or you could say use some common sense. I know that we're not on the duplication section yet, but I'm sure you can all, as well as I can, see what's coming. I'm going to have to waste my time now copying and pasting the exact same block and changing one character for flipping 6 methods. I'm sure nobody wants to, I'm sure you'd rather, I don't know, deworm your cat or tie your shoelaces and watch me do any of that stuff. So instead of that, we're going to create a new method, which is a little less expressive, but a lot more useful. Create function button. I'm going to pass in the text that we want on that button. I don't know Java, clearly. Okay, so it still doesn't compile. That's okay. So now all of these red ones, instead of having to copy and paste, we can just call, this is the decimal button. This is the equals button. This is the division button. Oh, wrong way. Huzzah. We'll also backfill these with our new method. It's just like watching paint dry, isn't it? Watching the code. Okay. Glacially slow, but we got there. So once again, Feel free to disagree with me, but I would say this is kind of night and day better. What questions do people have about this while I try to find out how to close that bit? Feel free to type away in the chat. This is the first stage, I would say. Now, we do have these variables down here. We could continue, but again, we've only got an hour. So I want to do one section and show you kind of beginning to end that whole section so that you can then take away and apply it in your code bases. Any questions, Jake, before I commit?
No.
Encapsulate in creating number buttons. Okay. Now, the next one is no duplication of code or ideas. Create number button, create number button, create number. It's fine. You can read it, sort of. But really, this is the bit that we care about. The other thing that I really don't like about this code is I can't visualize it. I want something that looks like that. So this is where a technique I learned a long time ago from somebody. We were refactoring a test at the time, and they said, I think it would be much better if we laid out the numbers as they are on the screen. And I remember clearly, I was quite junior at the time, and I said, that's a terrible idea. I don't think that's going to work. I was really arrogant at the time. Not typical me, but for whatever reason, that day I had a bee in my bonnet. And I said, I think that's a terrible idea. And they said, well, just wait and let me complete, please. So they completed it. And the moment they completed refactoring, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to forget how good this looks compared to how it was. And that's always stuck with me. When you've got some kind of a grid or columns, or maybe you've got timelines. I've done it in tests before. When you've got time scales and you've got maybe a month and you want to test just before the end of the month, just after the end of the month, you can start arranging your code like a diagram. And so people can read your code and it's not just words on a screen. It starts to visually make sense. So what we're going to do for this is, let's see if I can remember how to do this. We're going to create a list. We're going to create a list of lists. And essentially what I want is, and I may have to cheat and look back at the code, but in Ruby, it would be 7, 8, 9, and you'd wrap that in a row, and you'd have a plus at the end of it. This is something I often do as well. I just like, even pseudocode, just mess around. And so you can see, if I now had this as 6, 5, 4, etc., 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 this would read really nicely. So I am just going to take a peek at one I prepared earlier, which is no duplication. Show no duplication. So this was it here. Again, I'm just going to cheat a little bit. Sorry, everyone. This is starting to remove all that duplication of creating keypad. So we want to import all of that stuff. Auto lay it out. Interesting. We can at least create that. A button. What I did was I create a very simple method here that just matches whether the number in this grid, this big old grid here, says if it's a number, then call the create number. If it's a function, then create function. Reformat that. And doesn't like me for some reason. I think it's just saying it's not being called out. It's being called twice. That'll be why. Defined twice even. Okay, so it still doesn't like this. Why not? List string. Okay, maybe it's the imports that I've got wrong here. I don't think we need the import array list. There we go. It's happy now. And so now we can comment out all of this stuff. Run the code. Boom. Now, what are we going to do you think, Jake, to add our new sign button? We want it along on the same row as the brackets, by the way.
We will just add the sign symbol, or without on line 111.
Exactly. So the change becomes, rather than wrap our heads around indices and adding and removing and like trying to copy and paste, all that nonsense, we type 4 characters. Boom, we've got our change. We have now eliminated as much of the duplication as we can. It's a bad practice to comment out code. Should delete it. That's why we have version control. So sorry about that. Getting you into bad habits. So we're going to commit this. And we're going to say remove duplication. Okay. We've now achieved rule 3, no duplication. Now, of course, you could say this is duplication. I mean, you can go too far with this stuff. There is a certain point at which the syntax doesn't let you become any more concise, especially in Java. Does anybody have any questions about this before we move on to the 4th and final stage, which is no dead code? Or no unnecessary elements?
What's the term for what you've done there with when you said you're looking to visualize it? So is there a term for that?
No, not that I'm aware of. I suppose it would be isomorphic. That's just, it's not a special word, it's just a what does isomorphic mean? Am I correct with that? In mathematics, an isomorphism is a structure preserving mapping between 2 structures that can be reversed by an inverse mapping. Good old Wikipedia. It makes a simple complex. Isomorphic, having a similar structure or appearance, but being of different ancestry. So I suppose it's isomorphic in the sense that you're representing the calculated structure in code, sort of. There's probably a better word, but I don't know what it is. Suggestions are most welcome. But it's a really powerful technique if you can use it in the right time, in the right way. readability on steroids. All right then. The one disadvantage of this, of course, is if the GUI changes, then you have to change the representation here. So I could imagine a lot of shuffling around having to be done just because you've decided, oh, I want like rows of 5 instead of 4, or 3 instead of 4. And also you can imagine the GUI changing and this getting out of sync with it, basically. So it may well, so there are weaknesses to it, of course. It could be that your code stays static, the GUI changes, and now your code is even more confusing than it was before because, you know, there wasn't any structure with it at all, but now it's a misleading structure. It's telling you that you've got a 4x5, 5x4 structure, and you might not have in the GUI. So that's one thing to consider as well. Okay, so we're now going to do what is, I believe, everybody's favorite bit. And no, I'm not talking about playing Minecraft. I'm talking about deleting code. This is going to be amazing. So anything gray, IntelliJ is saying it's unused, you don't need it. So Jake, if you can do me a favor and either hit Option Return or go onto the little yellow light bulb icon at the left there and Safe Delete and click OK. Yes. And do the same thing for Create Subtract button. This is so fun when you've done all the hard work of going through all the other 3 steps. And now you're just looking around and going, oh, I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. And we're going to do the same for Create Add button, of course. We don't need that nonsense anymore. And then I'm just going to scroll up. Sorry for taking over here, Jake. I believe we don't need any of this nonsense now. So I'm not 100% confident about that. So we're going to comment it out, run the calculator. Oh, doesn't like it. Null pointer exception, because it's still doing these 2 buttons at the very end. Okay, this is why it's important to run the tests with incredible frequency. So it's doing function button 6 and function button 5. I've deliberately not replaced those because they've got different layout code. But they are called clear button and del button. Del button, seriously. Clear button. Let's see if we can clean this up. Del button. Okay, cool, works. Then if I comment all of this out, I'm hoping. There we go. Just like that, we've got rid of a whole load of confusing nonsense. We can do the same with all of this, not with a clear and del, of course, because we've just used those. Excellent. And of course, there's a lot more here to do, but the area that we decided to clean up is now much better. So I'm going to commit that. And this is refactor, move dead code. And we still have 12 minutes left. And there is one more thing I want to highlight, which is we've gone through all the 4 steps, but now it's recursive. So you can go into the code that you've written and go right back to the top and say, how do I make the names better? How do I remove duplication? How do I remove any dead elements? So if we look at here, this is also I've been through this exercise a few times, so I'm kind of guiding you here. In a real life situation, you'd have to kind of feel this out. I was going to say that as my favorite, didn't expect you to say that. And then above, there are also 2 libraries we imported that are duplicated. Great point, thank you. Dead code. Yeah, dead code, optimizing imports is definitely dead code. I did not see that, so thanks for pointing that out. And also, we're not really done with the naming. These 2 are terrible, so I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. Yeah, button and delete. Bootful. Make sure it all works. Two of the biggest mistakes I make consistently, even now I'm a senior, is waiting too long between commits and waiting too long between running the tests. Okay, awesome. So now we're going back to the top. Step 1 is it works. Step 2 is names that express intent. And then step 3 is duplication. Now you can see here, got quite a bit of duplication. Do we care? Do we care? Right now we don't. But let's say we want to make the font on the whole calculator different. We want to just style it differently. So I'm going to, we want Arial bold. So I'm going to go in here, we're going to make the change, I'm going to rerun it. Say what? Only some of them are bold and the others aren't. That's no good. Oh, that's because I've got duplication here. So I now need to go in, change this to be that. Okay, it's not that big a deal. But it's duplication. And so therefore, you need to change it in 2 places. We don't want that. And also, it's not just that duplication. The size is duplicated. The vertical and horizontal text position is duplicated, and a whole bunch of other things. So we're going to remove that duplication, and I want to show you one last little strategy that has been very useful to me over the years. When I was shown this, it absolutely blew my mind. My mentor at the time said to me, make sure, don't remove the duplication. The first step is to make things look similar, but not the same. Make them look similar, but not the same. So you want to see patterns. He said to me, I want to see more duplication, not less. I was like, what are you talking about? More? We want to get rid of the duplication, no? He said, no, we want to wait for the duplication to build up. Keep it building, keep it building, keep building. And then you can see the pattern. And then you arrange things that are duplicated to be pattern-like. And there you can see what's different and what's the same. And then you can extract. So we're going to just, it may seem like a cosmetic exercise, but we've got set focusable, okay, those 2 align. We've got set font. You can see font here is after focusable. Font is below the vertical and horizontal position. So we're just going to match them up. So we're doing focusable and then font. And then down here, we've got size. So let's match those 2 up as well. Vertical position, horizontal position, action listener, foreground, and finally return it. And what I really don't like here is we've got button and number button. I don't like the mismatch. So let's make them similar. Similar, but not the same. Function button, number button. Cool. So now that we've got them in order, again, you might disagree with me, but I think the differences become a lot more apparent here. Orbitron stays the same. The size is different. The all of those things, that's the same, that's the same. Okay, so I'm going to move the thing that is different up to the top. Because it doesn't matter, presumably, what order these go in. And that is an assumption, so we're going to run it, make sure, not messed anything up. The 2 clear buttons are gone. Oh dear. So I've done something somewhere to make those 2 clear buttons disappear. I didn't notice that. It's something like that. No, it was before that. We've got 7 minutes to go, so I don't think I'm going to be able to.
I think the clear button and delete button need renaming at the top as well. I think. No.
It's setting a location for them, and it's creating a new J button.
No, they're not.
I wonder if it's something to do with adding the sign there. No, it's not. Add clear button, add delete button. We're going to move on because I don't want to spend time on that. But basically, you want these two things to be organized so that the repetition becomes apparent and the differences bubble up to the surface. So I'm just going to refactor that. Function button. Set size, set focusable, set font. Move that up. And so now we have exactly the same order and we have the difference at the top, which is kind of cool because now we can just extract a method that says create some apart from the missing function buttons. I've done something silly there. You could also do it the other way around. So you could, I think it will probably be neater to do the set size at the bottom. Set size at the bottom. And then refactor all of this, including the initialize. Yeah, that's better. Function button, create button. And then create number button, create button, string or value I. It sets the different sizes. And we'll just move this down so that the order makes a kind of a sense. I generally like methods to call, methods below it. So it tells a story. There we go. That's our code. Any questions before we wrap up? We've got 3 minutes. The parameter in time, the create number button. I like it. I like it a lot. We don't want I. We want number. The value of number. How nice does that look? Seriously. That's amazing. Now, it actually is an int. And we have a string here, don't we? So that seems a little bit silly. We're converting from a string to an integer and then back to a string. So again, that's just cluttering up the code unnecessarily. So why don't we just say create number button cell. And in here, we'll change this to be a string. And we'll change that. It works. And this is text and this is number. Why don't we say function description? Or maybe, I don't know. Maybe text and number is okay. I'll leave that as an exercise for you to think about. We've got 2 minutes left. Thank you, Inam, for pointing that out. And now, sorry, I buried the lead, didn't I? We can change it in one place and boom, the whole thing works. If there are no other questions, I'm going to send everybody the materials. I'll send you a link to the GitHub source code so you can kind of remind yourself of what we were talking about today. And if there's no materials, thank you. There was no other questions. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I really appreciate you. Appreciate you all coming along to this crazy experiment that I'm doing. And I will speak to you all later.
Cheers, John.
Thanks, everybody.